Welcome to Heaven Awaits. My name is Leigh, and I narrate the near-death experiences of those who have died and have seen the other side. If you enjoy these videos, please consider hitting the thumbs up, subscribe, and bell icons to be notified of new content. Doing so is free, and it does help the channel grow. Get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee or tea, and let's dive into today's experience. On January 18, 2001, I began to feel intense abdominal pain. I called for an ambulance to come to my apartment, and by the time it arrived, my right side had become very rigid. Upon my arrival at the hospital, I was diagnosed with severe peritonitis due to the rupture of my appendix sometime before. The emergency room doctor declared my condition very serious and ordered that I be prepared for an operation as soon as possible. Although I was semi-delirious from the pain, I could hear what the doctor was saying, and because of my background as a medical and biochemical translator, I understood that I had a life-threatening condition. The preparations for the operations were completed, and I was in the operating room awaiting the arrival of the surgeon who would operate. I remembered that I hadn't said the prayers which I usually say every morning, so I began to say them to myself silently as I was waiting. As I reached the end, I seemed to slip into a somewhat different state and began asking myself whether I was ready to die and leave behind everything I had known in my life. Am I ready to leave my profession? Am I ready to leave my passion for music? I said yes to these questions one by one. The last was, am I willing to leave my 2 children? I said yes, and suddenly felt myself become lighter and free of pain, although I still felt my body and could feel that my side was rigid. I was then told, not with words but in some way that I felt very deep inside me, that it was not my time to die, but that when the time would come, there was absolutely nothing to fear and nothing to be lost. I felt a strong feeling of exhilaration despite my weak condition. Shortly thereafter, the anesthesiologist began to administer the general anesthetic, and I lost consciousness. I regained consciousness and was taken to a room at the hospital. The first nurse who came to see me seemed rather worried and said she heard that I had had a very difficult time in the recovery room. I didn't understand exactly what she meant, but based on her comments and those of the doctors, it seems that I went into shock or had some sort of crisis during or after the operation. As the general anesthetic wore off, I felt tremendous pain. The medical personnel refused to give me any painkillers, saying that they might be dangerous for my heart. The surgeon who operated came to see me the following day. He said that he was shocked by what he saw during the operation and that my appendix must have ruptured almost 5 days before. He didn't believe me when I said that I had felt no pain at all until the attack, which led me to call the ambulance. He warned of possible complications during recovery and stressed the importance of my will to recover. The days that followed were filled with pain and discomfort and accompanied by hallucinations induced by the morphine and massive doses of antibiotics which I was given. The first change I noticed in myself was that I no longer feared death. The possibility of life-threatening complications, which the surgeon had mentioned, did not disturb me, although I was determined to follow his instructions for enhancing my recovery. I seemed to be doing simple gestures in new ways, but at first, I thought this was due to my condition and the medications. I was released from the hospital 1 week later. When I entered my apartment, I had a very strange sensation, as if I was entering for the first time, but also as if only part of me was entering. The period of my convalescence was difficult because of my condition and the need to go to the hospital every 2 days to have my wounds checked, and also because my wife fell into a state of depression at exactly that time. Nevertheless, as the weeks went by, I felt more and more serene and began to see life with a sort of joy that went very far beyond what I had known before. I have believed in God since my childhood, although I was never really a member of any church and never attended services regularly. Starting about 2 months after my experience, I found myself drawn to reading the Bible and even more so to the works of modern spirituality authors such as Deepak Chopra and Neil Walsh. I felt a compulsion to read these books, although I had never heard of the authors and purchased the books almost at random. The Bible seemed clearer to me than ever before. The book spoke like reminders of a truth which I had always known, but somehow forgotten. At the time, I didn't associate my new interest in spiritual reading with my near-death experience. I didn't even understand that I had had an NDE because I had never read anything on the subject other than some skeptical newspaper articles. It was only when I read about near-death experiences and conversations with God and other books that I realized that there seemed to correspond to my experience. As I write this text, more or less on the first anniversary of my near-death experience, I feel that I have become a very different person. My notions of spirituality and life purpose have changed greatly. I see the world and my fellow beings very differently. I do not fear death and live in acceptance of the revelation I was given. Death is not the end of anything, and all our real needs will be taken care of. Where before I saw mostly contradictions in spirituality, in the world, in history, everything now seems very coherent. I can see now that my NDE started a process of change that has gone on throughout the year since then, and which seems to be continuing. That does it for our first experience, moving right along to our second experience. It was the night after my grandmother's funeral. I was already feeling very distraught and depressed. I tried to find this guy I'd been seeing, thinking that maybe some companionship would make me feel better. Being unsuccessful, I headed home to call my best friend. I told her how I was feeling, and we concluded that the best thing for me to do was to go to her house and get wasted. By the time I drove the 20-something miles to her house, she had successfully acquired a 6-pack of hard lemonades. We also decided to finish up the last of her pot stash. We took the drinks and the pot out to my car parked in front of her house. We had no intention of driving anywhere, but we didn't want to stink up her room and have her parents find us out. I took the first sip of the drink and immediately felt that something wasn't right. My heart began to beat strangely, and I felt a little lightheaded. I dismissed it as adrenaline or anxiety or something, and we continued. I only took a couple of hits from the pipe and was on my second drink when it began to happen. I felt like I never had before. I could barely move. I felt heavy. I was having trouble breathing and taking heavy breaths that made my friend think I was trying to fake an attack. Then I heard a loud voice tell me to put down the drink and stop drinking. I was startled. The voice was very assertive and powerful. I listened and put the drink down. I then felt a window open up in the back of my head, and the air started rushing through it. I started to feel myself falling, though my friend later stated I was perfectly still. I could still hear the voice. She was telling me I was going to be all right. Things were going to be okay. I was safe and didn't need to be scared. I felt very calm even though part of me was terrified of what was happening. I had no control anymore. I couldn't move. I was trying to focus on something to keep me here, but I continued to fall. I could feel my heart stop beating, and my body became numb and cold. Everything became dark, and suddenly I was falling through a tunnel. It looked very futuristic, like something out of Star Wars, with lights zooming by me at warp speed. I could see images at the end of the tunnel, but none of them were clear enough to distinguish. They seemed very far away, but no matter how much I kept falling, they never got close enough for me to see. The voice was still reassuring me that everything was going to be all right. I suddenly felt jolted back into reality, literally like I had been thrown. My friend was shaking me, asking what had happened. I said I didn't know. The voice told me to tell my friend that if it started to happen again, to get help. She was scared, but I felt surprisingly calm. The voice told me to tell my friend to start writing what was happening down. I had a notebook in my back seat and told her to grab it. I then began to have a vision of a street with cars driving down it. It was in a city, and there were tall buildings all along the right side. All the vehicles were white, cars, trucks, and vans. They were all moving very fast. I became aware that at every intersection, there was a green light with a red left turn arrow. Then I saw an image of a dark car with a dark figure standing at the passenger window, as if talking to someone inside. The figure got in the car. For some reason, I felt afraid of this scene, the car, and the figure. Then the voice told me to stay away from the dark cars and dark figures. The images stopped. I decided to try to talk to this voice. I asked her who she was and if she was a god. She told me she couldn't answer me, but that I would learn on my own. Then I looked to the sky and saw an image of a smiling woman with wavy golden hair. Underneath her were stalks of golden wheat. She was glowing, emanating beauty, peace, and love. I had the feeling that she knew everything, from the past to what is yet to come. I decided to ask her a stupid, trivial question that only a teenager could think to ask at a time like this. What was going to happen between me and the guy I'm seeing? She laughed softly and said that she couldn't tell me that either, but that I had a gift, and if I learned to use it, then I would know. I became curious about this gift. I asked her what kind of a gift it was. She told me that I had a power, something that I was born with, and that it was time that I learned how to use it because I was sent to give a message. She told me I was special. I had a purpose, a reason to be here. I was beautiful and strong. Life was beautiful. Everything was beautiful. Everything had a reason and a purpose. Everything was happening for a reason, from the moment I was born. Everything down to the people I had met and places I had been. I have always believed myself to be a little psychic, but have always been skeptical. Now I knew it was all real. It was in me and greater than I had ever imagined. I just needed to learn how to use it. The woman told me that it was starting now. She told me to tell my friend to begin to write down every word that came out of my mouth and everything that she was seeing, feeling, and experiencing. The voice said my friend was going to write a book. That's why she was there. That's why we were together as friends on this earth. My friend was confused but obeyed. I felt as if I was slipping into a trance-like state. I began speaking. I could hear my voice but was not consciously aware of what I was saying. I slowly began to feel myself having control over my body. I could feel the presence of the woman disappear. I began to cry hysterically, not from fear, but from joy and confusion and helplessness. We had a purpose. I had a purpose. Somebody did care about me, love me. These were incredible concepts for me. Someone who has been raised an atheist, but found her way into certain aspects of paganism. I have never believed in a god, but had the feeling that there was most likely some kind of greater force somewhere. Now I know there is something greater out there. I have never wanted to go to church, but suddenly it seems like something interesting. I feel changed, different, and more accepting of myself and others. I don't yell at the people driving under the speed limit anymore. I am more tolerant of people, even my sister. I feel more comfortable with my body, something that is very welcomed after battling for 5 years with eating disorders. I am calmer and try not to hurry with things. I don't know if these changes will last, but I hope they do. I don't know what it was exactly that happened to me that night. I don't know if any of it is real. Later, after everything had calmed down, I read what I had said to my friend. It was beautiful. It was a message, almost like scripture or something. It was about life, not just mine, but everybody's. I feel compelled to tell it to everyone I see. It feels important to me. I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but for about 3 weeks or so before this happened, I noticed that my psychic awareness was increasing. I would have the feeling I was going to see somebody and turn around to find them there, or know complete conversations before anybody even finished a sentence. I also even knew that something was going to happen with this particular guy, and it did. I feel that this has been a very positive experience, one that I feel I have learned from and still have more to learn. That does it for today's experiences. As always, let me know what you thought in the comment section below. Until next time, stay safe and continue to be blessed.